Meeting is called to order. I'll lead the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll need a roll call to determine if we've got a quorum.
Ron Drew.
Here.
Aaron Tepley is not. Tom McCarthy.
Here.
Rachel Schultz. Here. Melanie Walters. Here. Douglas Marchinick is not. Steve Downs.
Here.
Ryan Cairns.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Was this meeting properly noticed?
Yes, this meeting was properly noticed.
Excellent. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Once the council's had a minute to read it, entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion for Mr. Cairns, second for Mr. Downs. Discussion of the agenda. Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Agenda approved. Next up, items for discussion and possible action. Item 1 is a public hearing on the 2026 budget. So the council's got some printed material up here, which of course has been available online. Do we have anybody online?
No.
We don't. Okay, well, it is a public hearing, so I will ask if there are any members of the public who would like to comment at the public hearing.
Do you answer this? Do you do the PowerPoint during the public hearing?
And I'm just reaching out to Alderperson Martinick. There we go. All right. Okay, I'll ask for the second time, are there any members of the public who would like to comment at the public hearing on the 2026 budget? Thanks for getting a shot of that, Rod. Okay, third request. Public hearing on the 2026 budget. Any members of the public who would like to comment? Okay, there have been no comments. There's no one who's indicated they would like to do so. So at this time, entertain a motion to close the public hearing on the 2026 budget.
Motion closed.
Motion for Mr. Cairns. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Downs. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of closing the public hearing on the 26 budget, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That one's carried. Item 2, Resolution 2025-14, establishing a percentage cost of living adjustment and wage increase for employees. What do we have here? Anybody?
Well, do you have the, are you able to pull the resolution?
Yeah, I sure can.
So in your packets, there is a resolution related to wage rates, so cost of living adjustment. This is something that we do annually. It starts at the Personnel Committee where we talk about what's anticipated, what the cost of living adjustment is anticipated to be. We also factor in things like the union contract. And so this resolution here establishes what the cost of living adjustment will be for all employees. We have full-time city represented employees, so that would be our law enforcement officers. Per their contract, they're set for a 6% increase, whereas full-time city employees, that would be the library, public works, administration, all of those departments except for utilities, they would be at a 2.75% increase. The same would be true for our part-time, our permanent part-time positions. So you can think of like the senior center coordinator, and then we have our full-time salaried employees, so same adjustment for them. For the temporary part-time or seasonal employees, there's no increase within the 2026 budget. We have listed on here this year our poll workers and our chief election inspector, and as you can see, elected officials committees. Those members also have no increases. Those rates are set in a different process. So this resolution would just be authorizing those percent adjustments based on the employee type.
Questions or comments? All right, and you can see she's got the graphic up right there. Again, it is available to the public online and will remain there.
It is Resolution 2025-14, resolution to establish 2026 wage rates. And it lists everything Ashley just said, which would be increase full-time city police 6%, city full-time 2.75% for those who are not part of the police union, permanent part-time 2.75%, city full-time salary 2.75%, temporary part-time seasonal 0%, chief election inspector goes to $11 per hour, poll workers to $9.50 per hour, elected officials 0% increase. I guess at this point then I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2025-14, the resolution to establish the 2026 wage rates.
So moved.
I'll give that one to Rachel. All right, Rachel and Melanie, we got that. Any further discussion of Resolution 2025-14? Okay, hearing none, we'll need a roll call on that one.
Schultz,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Marchnik is not here, Downs,
Aye.
Cairns,
Aye.
Fruit,
Aye.
McCarthy,
Aye.
motion carried.
Okay, and then next is item 3, Resolution 2025-15, which is adoption of the 2026 budget and establish the tax levy. Okay, so we did do a reval this year. So when people look at the graphic we have here and they see a percentage change in value in the city of 187%, that's not a typo.
That's just yours.
That's just mine.
That's just yours, so it's not the entire city, but that's just yours.
Just my taxes.
That's your assessed value.
My assessed
Assessed
value,
value.
187%, which is mine. So what she's explaining is my sheet is showing my taxes. So for example, my value in the reval was an increase of 87%. And that's not going to be uncommon. It hadn't been done since 2008. So when people see that, that's what that's about. That's not a typo. Okay, going from that point forward, Ashley or Misty, significant changes year over year, things we dealt with to get us to where we are.
Well, we have a PowerPoint if
Yep.
you'd like. Okay, so we'll just kick that off then.
You worked on it, you have to show
Yeah,
it.
we got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
we don't want to waste that. So every year we start out this way. What is a budget? We don't often think of it this way, but you'll hear me say a lot. You've already heard me say a lot. A budget, our budget, is a policy document. It is the policy of the Common Council. It's setting your priorities. And you do that by deciding how to appropriate the finite resources that we have. How are we going to fund things and to what level are we going to fund them? They are a reflection of your priorities. So it's a plan, it's forecasting. We don't know for sure. We do as well as we can in anticipating what revenues we're going to receive and what expenditures we're going to incur, but it is an estimation. Things change. We can't always expect what happens. Like COVID, for example, no one would have been able to properly budget for the year of COVID. But we do our best based on historical data, trends, the market, etc. And so this is a tool that provides transparency to the public. They're able to see how their tax dollars and other revenue sources that we're receiving are being allocated and where we're spending those dollars. So it is a policy, it's your plan, it's your priorities, and it's a tool for transparency. So what is the process? So department heads begin this process by forming their budget requests. That's usually July or August. They start that process. They're looking at that past historical data, what they're assessing, what their expected needs are, any challenges that they've occurred in the current year that they need to adjust for moving forward. If they plan on changing any of the services that they deliver or how they're delivering them, as well as, like mentioned before, what are the market conditions? Are there going to be any changes that they can anticipate that they will likely have an impact to their department? After they go through and formulate their initial request, they meet with both myself and Misty, and we review and refine that. And so we go line by line through their budgets and evaluate what those requests are. And then depending on the department, they may take that request to their home committee for additional review. After that, we go to the Finance Committee. We have several Finance Committee meetings, as you all know, and most of you were part of this year. Finance reviews those requests. and basically audits and kind of gets a sense of what is being asked for, how is this reflective of our priorities, and do we believe that any adjustments need to be made. One of the major things that we did during the Finance Committee meetings this year was talk about anything and everything that we could change or cut, because it was a very difficult budget to get through this year. And so we talked about a variety of different things, whether it's services that we provide or things that we're funding and maintaining, etc. We're looking at all of it, and we're going to continue to do that. After it gets through finance and the final adjustments are made, it goes here tonight before the full common council for a public hearing. And unfortunately, we did not have any visitors, which is not unusual. But it is a disappointment because, like I said, this is one of the most important, if not the most important meetings you will have every year. And you set the mill rate and ultimately adopt the whole budget. And then after that, after the budget is adopted, it is up to the department heads as well as myself to manage those budgets within the allowable amounts, and there's monthly revenue and expense reports that Misty prepares and provides, and then every month at your meetings you see the treasurer's report that has the summary of all of our balances, our debt service, etc. So there's a multi-level monitoring of the budget to ensure that we are operating within it, and anything outside of what's been adopted needs to come before the council and be requested and approved separate from what we're doing tonight. So this is just a quick glance at some of the things that have occurred this year. So ordinances, we've had a few ordinances that the council has adopted to include the tobacco-free parks, temporary use of road right-of-ways, naming and branding. A few policies were approved. One thing of note is the council rules. That is currently still in progress and will be continuing on as well as the committee review structure process. Several contracts or agreements were executed this year. The cobblestone agreement, panorama, garbage and recycling agreement, taxi, Storyfield, etc. In Public Works, they were able to chip seal about 30 blocks, which was a significant amount to get through, and at a significant savings with the method that was used. We implemented a robotic mower, we purchased a chipper, we were able to tackle the Church and Court Street parking lot in collaboration with the fire department, and we had a generator installed in the municipal building. So pretty major things that we had going on. This year we had 11 conditional use permits that were issued, 2 annexations, no rezones, but 63 zoning permits. And these are pretty significant numbers compared to years past. During my time here, we've never seen that many conditional use permits, let alone just regular zoning permits being issued. So it is a reflection of fully staffing that role and having that person here to be managing those things. For donations, we were very fortunate to receive a sunshade for the splash pad, a trailhead sign and a Purple Heart sign was donated, trash receptacle was donated, dugouts for both Crosscup and North Park, and then we had a monetary donation for fireworks. So we had great generosity this year. We also were very fortunate in receiving 2 grants, innovation planning grants, which are one for Simons and one for GIS. From a personnel perspective, we hired a financial officer. We reclassified the municipal services specialist from a limited employee to a full-time employee, so that's Darcy's role. We now have a vacancy in our clerk position because of a relocation, and our zoning administrator position is vacant as well due to transitioning to be the buildings and grounds lead. So just some changes there, mostly positive. And then just a few pieces of equipment, vehicles and equipment that we've sold, the Zamboni, a Ford F-350, and a couple snow blowers. And so these we've sold using Wisconsin surplus and gone through that process. So just a quick glance, some of the highlights from 2025. So looking forward, what are we planning or prioritizing in 2026? So one, we want to finalize a capital improvement plan, a very thorough capital improvement plan that incorporates joint projects, so with the utilities, streets and utility projects, and beyond that, as we've talked about in council and in finance committee meetings, with things becoming more and more difficult and the need to borrow in order to fund large projects like our utility projects and street projects are, we have to do better than we've ever done at collaborating and coordinating on those projects. And so we have to have a strategic schedule for that and time that well with when some of our existing debt would fall off, so there's not extreme hikes or changes in the tax rates. We want to look at continuing to update our road conditions. So what's the classification? What's their condition? How are we going to capture what the true on the ground rating is for those? So that way we make sure we're getting appropriate GTA or aid from the state for our road while also helping to inform a capital improvement plan. So how do we prioritize what roads get redone versus others? Through an objective system like PACER ratings. We are looking at doing a complete inventory of our sidewalks, curbs, and gutters, so that way, again, we can have a systematic strategic plan on how we can accomplish improving those things and working with the community to improve what they may be responsible for as it relates. Continue with street overlays and chip sealing, continuing to evaluate our fleet, and establishing a long-term replacement schedule. And so while you may have heard we replace things every 3 years or every 5 years, we don't have a formalized replacement schedule. And so we're looking at creating that based on the equipment that we need to have, and that really works best for what we're doing now. There is going to be in 2026 equipment changes. So what we've always done is not necessarily what we're going to be requesting in 2026 as we better learn what would suit us. We're going to continue to work on economic development initiatives. Please forgive the imprecise wording in there. It says secure hotel developer, and really what's meant by that is investment group. We're working with Cobblestone already, but we have to assemble an investment group in order to continue to move that project forward. So we're going to continue to do that, continue to solicit new developers with the emphasis on housing and growth and affordability. And then managing the HUD grant funding that we have, as well as always seeking new grant opportunities that might be appropriate for us to take on. We want to continue improving our digital systems for our day-to-day functions, like issuing permits and taking payments, improving the public's access to the information we have, assisting them in completing things. How do we make it easier? How do we help people get the information that they need? We want to continue streamlining our records management system, so making it easier to find historical information and just overall improve our records management system, while also looking at our fee schedules citywide. So the fees that we're assessing and making adjustments to them so that they're appropriate for the true cost of providing that service today. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, really focusing on the organizational culture, cohesion, and unification. Really bringing departments together more and maximizing the opportunities that we have for sharing resources, and whether that's vehicles, equipment, or people. And maximizing what we can do if we look outside of our little department or our silo, and that's between city departments or the city and the utility and beyond. Just continue to build on the progress that we've already made, and find ways to reinforce a culture of fiscal responsibility and continuous improvement. Okay, so if you were at the last finance meeting, this slide might look familiar. And so this slide is looking at revenues, so 2025 revenues versus 2026. And so there's 3 columns. That first column in each, the 25 and the 26 section, is what the adopted budget was. And so that's going to include things like grants or other revenue sources that we thought we may have. And then in the middle column, you can see on each one of them, that's really that if we pulled out those grants or those other revenues that weren't guaranteed, but we include them in there in case they did arrive. Those are those amounts. And then the third and final column, your net budget, that's what it actually costs, or actually, we're bringing in, or we need, revenue we must have in order to operate. So we pull out the sort of idealistic or the things we really hope happen, and that's the true amount that we must have in revenue, and we're projecting. We also, it's important to note, some of you are more familiar with the expenditure restraint program than others. Expenditure restraint is a calculation completed by the state, and then they provide us a percentage that says you have your allowable tax levy that is tied to net new construction, but separate from that, there's a program called expenditure restraint, and as long as you don't exceed the limit we provide with expenditure restraint, you will get aid. You will get aid. And so the number fluctuates a little bit. I think historically we were around 40,000. We're anticipating about 25,000. So as long as we don't spend more than what they've limited us to spending, we will get that aid. And so it's something that we prioritize every year during the budget process to comply with that program, so we receive that aid. But although we're complying with it, it doesn't mean that if in the event we had a budget year where we had a project that required us to exceed it, that we couldn't exceed it. We're just making informed decisions and understanding that if we do that, we'll lose this aid on a one-time basis. Okay. So this is basically the table that you just saw, but in a visual form. And the key note here is, while we talk about tax levy and everybody is very familiar with tax levy, in reality, as far as the total funding of the city's operational budget, the local tax levy is only 34% of what we receive in revenue that actually funds the city. So it's something that everybody is rightfully concerned about, and we want to try to keep that as low as we possibly can. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not the most, it's one of, but not the most significant funding source that we have. All right, so this is by department. So of the total budgeted revenues, not counting capital outlay, our revenues are decreasing from 25 to 26 by about 1.57%. So there's some decreases related to fees. So we talked about earlier the patterns. So what are we anticipating? What are the trends? What's the historical data? And so based on that information, there's some adjustments that were made in what we're expecting to receive in fees. Some of it is related to how we receive revenue from the school for the community resource officer, habits or trends in rentals of our facilities, and a lot of it is, you'll see fluctuations that can be attributed to how we're accounting for things. So one example, I don't know if it'll be super easy to parse that out in here, but the way we accounted for senior center trips. We made an adjustment in that, and so it causes a fluctuation that really isn't expecting to have a loss in revenue. It's just how it's reflected in the accounting.
The biggest one would be the tourism one.
Yes, and so with tourism, thank you, Misty.
Mm-hmm.
That change is with tourism, the way that through the decision of the council, the way that the tourism department is currently structured is a department of the city, but we're looking to transition tourism to be a standalone entity, so separate from the city, and so it wouldn't be reflected in our financial information, revenue and expenditures tied to that. However, we don't know exactly when that will happen, so we are anticipating to receive some revenue and have some expenses, but not an entire year. Additionally, we're also moving tourism from the way we've always accounted for it into, you think of it as its own fund. So we're holding that in a separate place than everything else. And then ultimately our tax levy, our allowable tax levy increase was $3,302.
Good?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so just another visual representation of what we went over. There,
I'm a piece of the pie kind of person. So,
okay, so expenses by department. So this is comparing 20, just like with revenue, we're comparing 25 to 26, and what are the changes? What do we notice that's different? Here, there's the biggest shift in this is related to, again, accounting. So we currently are accounting for our buildings and grounds crew wages in one section, and in 2026, we wanted to do better and accurately reflect the true cost of operating departments or various services and functions of the city. So we took those wages of the buildings and grounds crew and we attributed them to all of the areas in which they work. So that's cemetery, airport, the parks. It's all of those areas, this building, they're touching all of those things. And so, if you were to ask, how much does it cost to operate the municipal building? It would be hard for us to give you an accurate number today because we're not accounting for the janitorial services that occur here, the maintenance on the outside, etc., because we're taking all of those wages and benefits and just putting them in one section rather than spreading them where they should go.
A great point there, if you look at the graphic and you see the change, actually just explaining why it's shown the way it is in the cemetery. I don't think people realize how much effort and therefore expense goes into maintaining our cemetery. And the best way I can say to explain that, our cemetery existed before our city was a city. Richland Center, they tell me 1887, and there are graves over there from the 1850s. So unfortunately, cemeteries are a growth industry, and they never have a recession. So from the mid-19th century to today, you can see how spread out the Richland Center Cemetery has become. And when you figure how much time it's going to take to mow around all the stones and weed trim around all the stones, and they keep adding more, which will not stop. I live across from it. I didn't realize till that happened, and I see our city employees in there it's like they're always there. How many hours? We have basically 2 full-time jobs out of maintaining the cemetery.
Yes.
And I think the people that live in town have no idea that that's true. And I think most of the elected officials, until we started breaking it down like that, didn't realize that either.
And we have 2 cemeteries.
Okay, explain that a little bit. We do, but...
Yeah. So the one that we usually talk about, the one that the mayor was describing, that one is far more labor intensive than the other cemetery, which is in the industrial park. That one's flat ground, smaller, much more easy to maintain, but both require the same things. A lot of string trimming, and especially the one in the city, there's some really challenging slopes, and it can actually be quite dangerous in navigating that with mowers. So it is during the summer, during spring to fall, it is 2 people full-time that it requires to maintain just that one cemetery, and we have a 4-person crew. So on top of the cemetery, we have acres upon acres, hundreds of acres of land, of parks, trails, etc., that same 4-person crew is maintaining, and half of them are dedicated to the cemetery. So it's a real challenge and something that does require all of us to think really long and hard about what can we maintain and what can we maintain adequately and with the respect and reverence that it deserves, like a cemetery. Okay. So aside from sort of the change in accounting that we have here, there's another change which I apologize for this. We did have a reduction for our NOVA video agreement, so it was cut in about half. For the recordings that we have done, there's a big change in the assessor, and that's related to the contract that we have for revaluation, and then annual maintenance. The airport, it's an area where we've never attributed wages to before, and so that's why you see that. A change like that, we're trying to add those in there. And then the library's on there, but that was just a modest increase that they requested. The public safety changes are primarily due to wages and benefits with refuse. So the landfill through the budgeting process with finance, that was one of those things that we discussed. Thank you. It was one of the things that we had discussed in trying to save where we could within what we could control that would have the least impact or detrimental impact to the community. And so the landfill was identified for potential closure. And so we've budgeted that the landfill will be closed by the end of Q1 of 2026. And so you see an adjustment there for that. The taxi, there is an increase. Of course, we had a new taxi contract and those costs increased this year as well. And then lastly, all other taxes, interest, audit, etc., that category, you can somewhat think of it as a placeholder for projects or expenses to be incurred, but only if we have a new source of revenue to offset that. So if we received a grant, then a project would occur. So we have a matching revenue and expense. We're not incurring an expense unless there is a revenue that we don't know right this second what it is, but if we were to receive one, that's where you would find it. And again, the purpose of this is to ensure that we're complying with expenditure restraint.
Yeah, Rachel's got a question. Anytime.
I understand about the cemetery. Where were those costs? Where did they used to be?
So it was just in the buildings and grounds section of the budget. All the full 100% of their wages and benefits were just there.
So the way I would explain that, and you just did a really nice job on it, but so as she just said, a lot of things were under one umbrella. So if you look at, what does it cost to break it down, to maintain the parks versus the cemetery versus the next thing, people want to call and ask about the footbridge and on and on and on. And as we've dug in deeper into what all of this takes to maintain it, it's absolutely astounding. The amenities that Richland Center added through the years, which we all want, all the parks and the trails and those things that we want, are actually very expensive to have because you have to have full-time employees dedicated to keeping them in shape. You have to insure them, things break, that to be repaired, on and on down the list. So what this is about, it's one thing for any of us to say that stuff is expensive. The question is how expensive and which thing costs what, because unfortunately, and this is just an unavoidable reality, as the next few years play out, funding some of these things is going to get extremely difficult. That's just reality. That's why I push the net new construction thing so many times and all of that. We're trying to find revenue anywhere we can because we know the expenses will exist and we know inflation happens and so on. Well, if you look at that, the elected people in here in the coming years are going to have their hands full with that list you see right there. I mean, what do you pay for and what do you not? How much effort here and how much not? And so what Ashley and Jason and Misty and everybody are trying to do is find a cleaner way to break things down so everybody understands it better. What it means to, how much does it cost? You say, I love my parks, we all do, but what do they cost? Versus just saying, this is parks and grounds. A little more detail for you to know what you've got your hands on.
Absolutely.
The other thing actually to note on here is the overlay, the street overlay came out of the
Yes,
streets.
thank you. One thing that historically we've included in our operating budget are street overlays. So we did chip sealing this year, correct? Chip sealing, yeah. Which is a little bit different than we had done in the past with overlays. However, we've always just had that as a line item in the operating budget with the difficulty, as the mayor was stating, with the difficulty in making the numbers work and covering all operating costs. That was one area that we identified. We are able to shift out of our general operating budget and put it in our capital budget. So in the budget as presented, as proposed, there is not a line item in the operating budget that would allow the public works crew to do overlays or any of that sort of work like we've done historically. However, there's every intention to still do that, but it's going to be planned for in a separate process that we're going to continue working with the Finance Committee and ultimately Council for final approval to adopt a capital outlay budget. So we do have within this budget a figure included for capital outlay, and we have designated funds and undesignated funds that we'll use to fund those projects, those items that are in the capital outlay, but those specific projects like overlays have not been gone through and approved yet. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so again, a pie chart showing those expenses by department. So kind of a summary of the notable changes. So wage and benefits, we just went through that resolution setting those percentages. Our health insurance, it was a pretty significant increase this year of 14%. On average, WRS increased by 1%. So the police went down, but everyone else went up, so it averaged out to about 1%. From a department level, I touched on it a moment ago, the transition or dissolution of the tourism department to its own standalone entity, the closure of the landfill, and we have worked with the finance committee to identify that having a hiring freeze through the end of Q1 for both the zoning administrator and the clerk position was a way to help us close the gap that we had in our budget and make it work. And so those are notable changes that are reflected in the budget that's proposed before you. I touched on just a bit ago about the street overlays being moved from operating to capital budget, with all of those coming from designated fund balance and discussing possible short-term borrowing. So this is like a summary page. So revenues in 2025 were about 10.2 million versus in 2026 10.9. So we're seeing an increase of 7.1%. Our expenses in 2025 was about 10.7, and in 2026 it's 11. So that's a 2.5 increase. So our revenues are increasing more than our expenses are, but not enough to have a balanced budget in the way that we would like to see. You can notice the difference there on the right side with the tax levy changes. It's an increase of $3,302. So last year when we adopted the budget, it was short. We had a deficit of about $539,000. This year the budget before you has a deficit of $82,000. And that is likely to decrease significantly. However, we could not incorporate the reduction yet because you've not made that decision to do it yet, but it's related to our insurance. The Personnel Committee just received a proposal for a new insurance provider, which will have a cost savings of nearly $50,000. So that will come before council on the 2nd. But again, like I said, because you've not made a decision to switch providers, we're going to budget worst case scenario. So if that is approved, then that $82,000 deficit will reduce approximately down to around $30,000.
Okay, so some points on that.
Oh, and I apologize, correction. Thank you, Misty.
You're welcome.
The insurance, we split costs with the utility, so we will not incur the full savings of that $50,000. It'll be split with the utility. So let's just say approximately $25,000 that will be reduced by.
And it's property and liability, it's not the health insurance plan.
Exactly,
Just to clarify.
yes. Not health insurance, property liability, crime, those other standard policies that we have.
Okay, if you look at that graphic again, you can see some great news. Revenues grew faster than expenses, and we love that. We're looking for that. But look up there. You see that last year we were literally short over $500,000. So with a lot of hard work, tighten the belt, look for opportunity. We're still short $82,000 despite the fact that we had a year where revenues grew at 7.1% while expenses were just 2.5%. So what does that really mean when you break it down? And this is for the public because as has become commonplace, there are no members of the public in the room tonight, but this affects every one of them and will. So when you look up there, all of this work to access as many opportunities as we could which is exhausting. Our tax levy went up $3,302. I'll repeat that. The tax increase, the levy increase that the city has to work with went up $3,302, while city expenses went up $267,628. This is why every opportunity that can be accessed must be accessed in a small town. When you look at your tax bill, public, please, when you get your tax bill and you want to say what happened, please read it. And when you read your tax bill, members of the public, please notice that you are supporting the city, the county, the school district, and Southwest Tech. And what you will see, if you please read your tax bill, is you will see increases across the board. And that's because every entity you support is dealing with numbers like that and dealing with the same system. So when you see that, please again take the time to read your bill and understand it. Ask questions if you have them, and read that. Tax levy increase for the city, $3,302. Expense increase for the city, $267,628.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely right. If your tax bill increased, it's not because the city is taxing you so much more. Your value changed. If we spread $3,300 across the entire, every parcel within the city, it's not going to cause property tax fluctuations which may occur. And that brings me to the paper that was shared with you. That's what your tax bill is estimated to look like. And unfortunately, I think all but one of you has a decent or significant increase to your tax bill as a result of the revaluation. So our mill rate, because of that, it's dropping from $9.22 per 1,000 of assessed value to $5.24. So that's cut in half. The mill rate dropped. It's a decrease of about 57%. So if you have a property that had a value increase of about 57 to 60%, you should see potentially a decrease in your property taxes. But if your change was greater than that, then you're likely to see an increase. And so it's very difficult when we walked through, and will in the future walk through, a revaluation. They can provide us with an average. The average change is, and for us it was about 76% for a residential property, so it gives us somewhat of a benchmark to guess whether or not your property taxes are going to go up and down. But it's only one piece of the puzzle, and there's lots of pieces that we have to have put together in order for us to have a good, solid idea of what the true impact to your taxes will be. So what we have and what's been provided to you is, after getting those pieces of the puzzle and putting them together, what the actual impact would be. So, like I said, you've got a copy of it there. It looks like this, where we can see, what is the city's portion of your total tax bill? What is the city's portion? In this image that we have here, the 24-25 is on your right, 25-26 is on your left. So last year, the property in this example was valued at $156,000. This year, after the revaluation, it increased to $250,000. So then you can see the changes between the city, the county, the schools, what those differences are between the years. And then you'll also notice that not only did those numbers change, but the first dollar credit and the lottery credit changed too. So they went down. So we have a revaluation and we have a decrease in those credits. And that's not something we could know at the time of the revaluation, and could forecast that to determine how much of an impact that might have. So you can see here that in this example, the school district, they went down slightly, Southwest Tech slightly decreased, the county slight decrease, and the city as well as a decrease. So we're seeing decreases, but we have a different value on the property.
So I have a question. Looking back at the previous page, this tax levy says increase $3,302. That is the total city levy increase, correct? So dividing that by the 5,114 people, that's less than 65 cents per person.
But it's not your tax levy is based on the value, your assessed value of a tax parcel. We don't have one parcel per person. I forget how many exactly, we have about, I think, 2,000 parcels or something in that neighborhood. So we're not able to spread it out equally based on population or equally based on parcel. It's based on the value assigned to each parcel. So some parcels are unimproved. They're just vacant land, so there's going to be less tax associated, but if you have a structure, you're going to be taxed more. So depending on the assessed value, that will change it.
I was just trying to point out that the increase is very minimal, less than 65 cents per person.
Absolutely, and that, thank you for that, because it's a misconception that we raise taxes and that's why your tax bill changed. This year, it's really not about the city raising taxes, raising the tax levy, because it's $3,300, but it's about the change in the value of your property. And while it doesn't necessarily feel good or make a difference when you receive that bill, another way to think of it is, well, for many years we've been out of compliance and our ratio has been, we want to be at 1, we were at 0.67. You know, we were in the low 6s, so we were way off. So for years and years and years, folks were not being taxed at the rate for which they actually should have been based on the value there. So if you didn't pull a permit, we didn't know you made an improvement, right? So you're not being taxed on the improvement that you made, but then we did a revaluation and all of a sudden you are in one big jump rather than an incremental increase. So it's really tough. And that's why, although again, it doesn't necessarily feel that way, it is important to capture improvements as they happen, so you have incremental adjustments rather than huge fluctuations. And it is important as the city that we do our best to make sure that we are as close to 1 with that ratio as we possibly can be, so we don't have big fluctuations like we're experiencing now to make up for being so out of alignment.
And it's also true that not everyone got an increase. You explained that a little bit, but not everybody did. And also, I believe what we were told, residential structures, residential properties tend to increase at a faster, higher rate right now than commercial did.
Yes.
So not everybody is seeing that. That reval is not pumping a bunch of extra money into the city, it's resetting who's paying how much.
Yeah.
So some people see a pretty good jump for the reasons Ashley just explained. Some people should see an actual decrease, and commercial buildings more likely to see a decrease than residential.
Absolutely. Yep, exactly. And then this is just a visual representation of the total amount that is levied by all of the taxing jurisdictions, so you can see the breakdown. So as we've seen historically, at least in recent years, Richland makes up the largest portion of the pie, followed by the city, then the county, and then a very small amount is Southwest Tech. And then this is, so when we were talking about earlier about trying to accurately depict and have reflected in the budget how much it truly costs to operate, whether it's the cemetery, the airport, parks, you name it, this is another way to sort of look at that as well, which is how much of the levy actually goes towards the departments that we have. So you can see the percent of levy that each department is using to operate, and then how much based on a home valued at $250,000, how much in dollars does that equate to? So sometimes I think that can be really helpful as taxpayers if we can see, you know, based on what our values, our individual values are, and we can get an idea of how much of our dollars are going towards specific things.
Ashley?
Yeah.
What is the debt service for again?
We have,
On this slide?
yeah, so we have 4, right now we have 4 different items that we've borrowed money for. Is that right, Misty, 4?
I think it's just 2 on the general fund budget. Well, one is TIF,
So we have,
the pool,
Pool, panorama, the infrastructure for panorama. There was a street lighting project that we did, an LED project. And I am so sorry,
Hazeltine?
I think it is the Hazeltine
Yeah, so
Road
the panorama
project.
one isn't on here, because that's paid for out of TIF.
Okay,
But it's the Hazeltine,
light project.
and the pool.
And the pool.
The
The
aquatic
pool's a
center.
big one.
So when you are going to do the capital outlay debt, it doesn't show up yet on your slides, right? It's outside the slide?
Right, so we're not, so our debt service is, you can think of it as outside of the tax levy. So it's, we can do in addition to with debt service. But even though we can do in addition to, we cannot put a figure in there of some sort of debt that we think we're going to have or we plan to have. We actually have to already have incurred that obligation in order for us to have it captured under debt service, which as a taxpayer is a good protection.
And you can't decide if you want to make like an extra payment. You can't increase your levy to make that extra payment
Yes,
either.
correct.
You know, yeah.
So I'll just do some quick math here for people because they're gonna see this and they're gonna make assumptions. This sheet that I have, Rod, this sheet, can you get this?
I can pull one out.
It's okay, just, Rod, can you just show that I have it in my hand? You wanna hit me? This sheet that they gave me up here is my own property value and my own property tax change year over year. And it shows me that the property that my wife is nice enough to share with me increased in value by 87% in the reval. And that's scary, right? 87%, my taxes are gonna go crazy. My tax rate of increase this year was 14.56%. So I went 87% greater value to get less than 15% in increase. And why I'm explaining that is because if you stop at the 187%, you're gonna give yourself some unnecessary anxiety. I just read a total that includes, to get the 14.56% increase in my taxes, it had to include city, county, school, and Southwest Tech, and then deduct out, school credit, first dollar credit, lottery credit. And my taxes didn't go up anywhere near the 87% that people will fear when they see the first number on the page.
Are we gonna pull that up and walk through it?
Sure, I sure can. We'll just pull up Todd's. Yours. Is that fine? Do you want me to walk through it?
Yeah, I don't care if
Okay.
you do.
So again, so we put this together for each of the elected officials here, just so that you can see specifically on your property what that looks like. And so you can see here over the last 5 years how the assessed values remain the same. And then Mayor Copperdahl's
Let me
went
jump in
up.
there. So my wife bought that house right before we got together, and she paid $105 for it in 2016. That's what set the value at the time under state law. It was sold for $105, so it was worth $105 in 2016. That's why you see the $105 every year until this year.
And so then the reevaluation, what they're saying is the assessed value is now 196 too. So technically, if you were to put it on the market today, that would likely be an amount that you could get for it or would list it at, is what the assessors kind of look at, right? So we're raising the assessed value to closer to market value to make sure that our aggregate ratio gets close to that 100%. And so what they did was a full market reevaluation, and you guys are fully aware of all of that. And so each property changed by a different percentage. In this instance, the mayor's changed by 87%. So his value increased by 87%, which is over that 60% that Ashley had mentioned during the PowerPoint. So of course, he's going to see an increase in his tax bill because that is over that 60%, where the sample that we showed you, the property that increased 60%, their tax bill actually went down about $300. So again, it's set to more equitably and fairly split the tax levy around the tax base based upon the value of the property. And so the first section just kind of shows you the last 5 years of what your tax bill looked like. If you pull up your old tax bills, you should be able, the number should be very close, maybe within rounding is all. So that number should be very close to what you've paid in the last years, and then you see the change from the previous year to the current year. There's a row here for that. And then individually, then I took and put a pie chart in there, because again, I'm a pie chart person. I want you to see kind of who gets what pieces of your pie. So how much of your tax bill goes to the county, how much to the school district, how much to the city, and then how much to Southwest Tech. And then, of course, the next one is how much are you paying towards funding the operations of the city? So based upon the percentages of what goes where, what costs what, this is what you're specifically paying. So in Mayor Coppernall's case, we could break it down to the point where it's approximately $400 of his is going towards public safety. So when it comes time to look at what do we cut and why do we cut it, you know, there's really significant differences in how much you're paying. You know, you'll hear in some municipalities, and you know, I don't know about here, but they'll say things like, let's close down the airport.
Right.
Well, but if you look at the overall cost, what does that really do, right? Or is it a revenue maker? For example, the refuse, right? So once we close the landfill, the garbage and the recycling, the new contract with the rates, because you're charged for those on the utility bills, actually is, we don't need any tax levy to support that service, because we're bringing in money to offset that cost. So again, you know, and that's why we need to look at the fee schedule to make sure that our fees are matching some of the services. For example, are we charging enough to issue a liquor license? Or are we paying for background checks that aren't even covering our costs? And then again, a pie chart. That just kind of shows, you know, who gets what piece of the pie. It's close to Thanksgiving, so.
So when Panorama comes online with their construction, the $3,209 or whatever it was, allowable increase for the levy, would that change?
Panorama's.
Pretend like they were already online, would it have changed it?
It's a little bit tricky because Panorama is in a TID.
Oh,
And
that's
so
right.
it's all contained within the TID. But that's also what Misty was mentioning earlier. Because it's in the TID,
Yeah.
we're using the TID increment to pay the debt service rather than going above and beyond.
So the other, let's say the Rainbow Drive project, if that gets developed, and then would that change the $3,000 figure?
So that would be factored into our net new construction. So once those homes are built and they're assessed and taxed, that would grow the tax base. So it would add to it, but then also that is controlled by a formula that the state provides. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one. We're doing new construction minus any sort of demolitions, etc. So it will increase it, but depending on how much is taken off too.
But properties that are in a TID will still count for net new construction?
Yes, yep.
And last I looked briefly, it's like at a 90%. I think Mayor brought up that it's at a lower percentage, not 100%. So what I found was 90, but so that will still count for
Yeah,
a little bit.
it's still really helpful, and I know that we talked about it in finance. I just don't recall if we went beyond it, but in order for us to get the minimum of what we need to have a balanced budget and to fund appropriately our operating costs, we would need to realize about $40 million in net new construction in 1 year. And then we need, 20 to 30 thereafter to maintain, at least. And so we're not anywhere remotely close to experiencing that, and it's not realistic to ever expect to experience that. We would need so many panoramas. I think, Mayor, you've said before, we need like multiple Walmarts, etc.
And that's why the system we're working under is absolutely punitive to small communities. Okay, again, so we're talking about $40 million in net new construction to stay even with the bills. That's not to put us in a better place, that's to not fall behind. So when you say that, $40 million, what do you have to build to do that? It's crazy, and we are in a small place, an hour from a big place, any direction, in steep hills with a ton of floodplain. The opportunities to build that don't exist here. It's not realistic in the least bit. So we're forced to work with a system the state enacted about 15 years ago that puts us at a disadvantage before you get out of bed. And as the years have gone by, and it's been in place as many years as it's been, it's now had a chance to really grab, because we've been trying to fight with this for years. That's why when opportunities come, you gotta be ready to go. And when you get, for example, the best deal is the best construction for the budget is construction that doesn't put debt on the city, that doesn't require a TIF. There are reasons you put debt on the city to get something done. There are reasons you do a TIF. But when you have one that doesn't need either of those, all of that tax money that's being paid is going to hit the budget after the first of the year into the next year, and you're not paying debt on it. You're not waiting for 10% to come out of a TIF, all of that stuff. And that's just it's critically important for everybody living in a small town to start paying more attention to this. When you look at this stuff and you see the jumps that the school districts have had, look at the referendums again, look at them again. Here it comes, Weston explaining it again, Ithaca explaining it again. It's not gonna end. And that all hits this. Look at my bill here. $1,600 to the school district versus $960 to the county and $1,028 to the city. Do I blame the schools? No, but you have to understand when you see that up there and you look at what everything costs and you understand that we're working with state laws that dictate a lot of what we do. You look at this, so's the school district, so's the county. So when any entity has a significant increase because they needed the money, your bill jumps, your tax bill is going to jump. And it could be in here, it could be across the street at the courthouse, it could be out at the schools. And we're all looking up going, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, do you not have parks? Do you not pay your cops? Of course not. You have things you have to pay for and you want to pay for them. But then it hits right here. And you look at how hard we work down here, and it's everybody. To cut what we can without hurting anybody and to build what we can wherever we can get it, and you still come out at a $3,000 increase in the levy, which is ridiculous. And when you had, whatever it was, $250,000 in new expenses in a year, and you see why the challenge is what it is and why it takes unity. It really is going to take this whole community. These government entities that are all being supported here in this pie chart have got to stay on the same page as much as possible too, because I just said it. A significant increase in the county or the schools would hit my tax bill the same way one at the city would. And you can't just say, what are they doing at the city, the county, or the schools? The question is, what are all four of those entities are doing and why? And the why very often is tied directly to state policy.
So, one of the things that you brought to mind when you said that, which is something that each of us as individuals can do. So it's not, what I'm about to say isn't going to impact the amount of your tax bill from the city, but it will have an impact on what the county taxes. So the county, unlike the city, is able to impose a sales tax. In 2026, they're projecting about $1.6 million in revenue from a sales tax. So the revenue that they received, what happens is they actually have to almost like deduct it from what they would levy. So the more sales tax revenue that the county receives, the more that we have people through tourism efforts, through just individual choices, preferences, etc., that choose to spend money in the city of Richland Center, in Richland County. The more that we have people doing that, the greater that sales tax revenue is for the county, which then decreases or suppresses how much that they levy to each of the municipalities. So for 2026, Richland County credited the city, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it was around $300,000. So the total that they would have levied the city was reduced by around $300,000 due to sales tax. So it's not sales tax is not a new revenue source, but it lowers what they're allowed to levy each of the jurisdictions within the county. So it's to our interest and everyone's interest to shop local, to support local often. And so it's a decision that we can all make, and usually on a daily basis, of where we're spending our dollars. And we can really, really support and try to suppress or maintain taxing levels just through a sales tax. And the more people we have from not Richland County coming into Richland County to pay that sales tax, the more everyone that lives here benefits. Okay, so that's all of the slides that we have prepared, and if there are any other questions, we would love to answer them.
I have another one.
Okay.
I know that some communities are revising how their tax bills look to reflect the, and this deals with the school district, because there is a lot of the state aid does not go directly to the school district. It has to go to private and charter schools and so forth. And there are some communities that are showing that loss, and as a result, then the local school district has to increase. Have you looked into anything like that?
So our tax bills are generated from a program that the county has, and then they actually print them and we receive them. So we're, as a city, I don't know that we would have much ability to make any adjustments with that.
Questions or comments for Ashley or Misty? All right, that was an excellent PowerPoint, and I know we've talked about it a lot, but I'm glad this is being captured on video. Okay, at this point then, let's get to that resolution. There we go. Which again, resolution number is 2025-15, and what it is adopting what was just outlined. You can see it there on the screen again. It is once again available to the public on the city website if you want to see it. It will stay up after the meeting. It will still be available online. Does anybody have any questions up here on any of those columns, any of those numbers? If we don't, if there are no more questions or comments, then we will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 25-15, which is adoption of the 2026 budget, which also establishes the 2025 tax levy.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Downs, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Walters, is there discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll need a roll call.
Excuse me, Downs.
Aye.
Cairns.
Aye.
Fruit.
Aye.
Tepley.
Aye.
McCarthy.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, that puts us next on the agenda is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Motion from Mr. Downs, is there a second?
A second.
Second from Ms. Tapley. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everyone. Tonight's meeting is adjourned.